Welcome to part 2 of Sacraments of Healing and Vocation, Matrimony, the second part of matrimony. The topics in this section will be the effects of the sacrament of matrimony, the goods and requirements of conjugal love. What do we mean by the domestic church? Mixed and interfaith marriages, divorce and annulment, and a few other contemporary issues. The major effects of marriage are the marriage bond and the grace of the sacrament. When you have received the sacrament, given your consent, and been united in Christ, a covenant between the spouses becomes integrated into God's covenant with man. As we mentioned in part 1, God is always comparing his covenant with humanity with the relationship between a man and wife in marriage. Therefore, authentic married love is caught up into divine love. A good marriage relationship is an image on this earth of the relationship between God and man, and relationships among the Trinity. Not only the love between the man and the woman, but the fruit of their love, their child. Therefore, a marriage concluded and consummated between baptized persons can never be dissolved. The spouses, fortunately, get the grace of the sacrament, which means that Christ dwells with them and works with them in their marriage relationship, gives them the strength to take up their crosses and so to follow him. Yes, there are going to be crosses. Every human life has them, and with the grace of God, we can get through them. The grace helps them to rise again after they have fallen and to forgive one another. Very important to forgive not only yourself, but each other. To bear one another's burdens. The burden of one spouse is also the burden of both. And we get two human persons as well as Jesus Christ helping us to bear these burdens. And to be subject to one another out of reference for Christ. There's not that one is the boss and the other is the slave. No, they are both the boss and they are both the slave. They are subject to one another. So the goods and the requirements of conjugal love. The essential attributes of a Christian Catholic marriage are unity, indissolubility, and openness to fertility. All three attributes must be present for a valid Catholic marriage. Therefore, polygamy is incompatible because it goes against unity. Divorce separates what God has joined together. And the refusal of fertility turns married life away from its supreme gift, the child. What do we mean by the domestic church? Well, we mean that it is in the bosom of the family that parents are, by word and example, the first heralds of the faith with regard to their children. Even if they don't tell their children explicitly how important the faith is, by the way that they live, by the way that they pray, by their Christian way of life, they are teaching their children. And of course, they usually do use words. You teach your children the prayers, you say grace at meals, you take them to church regularly with you. But they learn just as much by your example, if not more, than they do by your word. Be careful you don't give your children the idea that when they grow up, they don't have to go to church. This is only something that children do. And they will get that idea if you yourself also do practice your faith, and they can see that you do that. The family is a community of grace and prayer, a school of human virtues and of Christian charity. The family is the first community a child experiences, and what he experiences there, he or she, they will tend to think that's how human beings relate, that's how human beings are meant to relate to God and to each other. So the family is extremely important, both to bring your children into the community of the church and the larger civic community. As it says in Proverbs, "My son, forget not my teaching, keep in mind my commands. For many days and years of life and peace will they bring you. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. On your own intelligence rely not. In all your ways be mindful of him, and he will make straight your paths." Potential problem in marriage is when the spouse has different religious beliefs. This can be overcome, of course, and there are many people, as you know, who do not, the man and the wife do not have the same religious affiliation. We call this a mixed marriage if it's a union between a Catholic and a baptized non-Catholic. Both are Christians, so they do believe in Jesus Christ. That there are the differences in practice between, of course, various non-Catholic Christian denominations and the Catholic Church. It requires the appropriate permission for the marriage to occur and be a valid marriage in the church. With proper permissions and arrangements, it may be celebrated in either the Catholic or the non-Catholic church, and the priest and the other minister may both be present at the wedding. An interfaith marriage, which is called disparity of cult, is a union between a Catholic and an unbaptized person. And this is a little more serious. It can be approved and it can be done. But there must be an express dispensation, because otherwise it would be an impediment to the marriage. And if it is to be conducted, if the ceremony is to be conducted as a site other than a Catholic church, it requires the approval of the bishop. The problem and things that you need to consider before entering into this type of a marriage, either one, is how will the children be raised, in what religious tradition. There is a danger of religious indifference, of saying, well, they're all religions are the same, so it really doesn't matter. And we don't believe that. And possible disunity right in the heart of the home if the relation between spouses is such that their difference in religious belief becomes a problem. And this will be very confusing for the children. Of course, the permission or dispensation, in order for it to be approved, presupposes that both parties know and do not exclude the essential ends and properties of marriage. Both spouses believe that it is essential in a marriage that it be between only those two persons. They will be faithful to each other, that the consent once given is indissoluble, and that the procreation and education of children is an essential component. Not that you are totally required to have children. Some persons physically are not able to, but that you be open to the possibility and do not artificially prevent the conception of children. And then there's the problem of divorce. It says in Mark, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." So, since you are bound for life, an action of yours cannot dissolve that marriage. The state cannot dissolve what is indissoluble. The state can grant you a divorce, but it cannot dissolve the marriage bond which you received in the sacrament. The state has no authority in that area. Initially, the Catholic Church respects all marriages and presumes that they were valid. If you are a divorced Catholic, in good standing with the Church otherwise, and have not remarried, you may still receive the sacraments, including the Eucharist. Or, if a Catholic has remarried following an annulment. The annulment is an official declaration after an investigation by the Catholic Church that a valid marriage bond was not created in the first place. We'll talk about that more in a minute. If a divorced Catholic has remarried civilly without having their prior marriage annulled, then their situation objectively contravenes the law of God, and they cannot receive Eucharistic communion as long as this situation persists. However, they do remain members of the Catholic Church. They are not excommunicated. So annulment, the word means that conditions were present that made the marriage invalid according to Catholic Church teaching. There may have been a problem with the consent, or one party or another, or both, had an explicit intention to not be faithful to each other exclusively, or not to ever have children. If someone gets married explicitly stating that they are not going to have children, the marriage would not be valid in the Catholic Church. If an annulment is proclaimed, this does not affect the legitimacy of any children that were born of the union. The children are not considered illegitimate children. They are considered legally conceived and born children. Does not mean that there was no civil, sexual, or emotional relationship involved. An annulment is declared by the Church, by a tribunal of the Church, after an examination of the validity of the marriage. And this can be a very extensive process, including witness statements and so forth. Some grounds could be there were flaws in the rite. It wasn't conducted correctly. Some element was missing. There was already a legal impediment. One or the other of the parties was not free to enter into this marriage. Or flaws in the consent, such as intent to exclude fidelity or fertility. Now, some contemporary issues in our society. First of all, we have to remember that the definition of marriage is a lifelong commitment between one man and one woman for the good of the spouses and the begetting and raising of children. Those two goals, ends, purposes of marriage are equally important: the good of the spouses and the begetting of children. In cohabitation, which is very common in our society today, an unmarried man and woman live together in a sexual relationship, sometimes even begetting and raising children in the same household. The problem with this is it lacks the commitment, the security, and the commitment of a lifetime promise to be faithful to each other. It's something that one person could walk away from at any moment. A marriage license, a marriage certificate is not simply a piece of paper, particularly in the church. It is a sacrament in which you receive the blessings and the graces to help you to live this life fully and faithfully. And simple cohabitation does not achieve this goal. Same-sex unions, they are now calling unions, agreements between two persons of the same sex a marriage. You know, it might be a very nice friendship, it might be a loving relationship, but it is not a marriage. Physical capacity for complementarity and fertility. Two persons of the same sex do not complete each other in the same way that two persons of opposite sex do and are meant to and are designed to. This is kind of a tragic situation in our society, and it's very difficult for the persons involved, but it is not a marriage. And of course, polygamy lacks unity, that by its very nature, it is not one person, one man and one woman being faithful to each other for life. As it states in the Catechism, the Church clearly teaches that discrimination against any group of people is wrong. However, these issues involve a redefinition of marriage, which may not be condoned. We may not judge people, we may not persecute people. We simply cannot say that two people of the same sex are married, or that one person is married to multiple people of the opposite sex. That just isn't what marriage is. So here in part 2, we have talked about the effects, the benefits of the sacrament of matrimony, the goods and requirements of conjugal love. What do we mean by domestic church? What do we mean by mixed and interfaith marriages? What are some of the potential problems that could occur? Divorce and annulment issues, and other contemporary issues relating to marriage.